Go away. Dude, Winter Storm Finn just kicked my absolute butt, and it didn't even drop the first snowflake here. I absolutely am disappointed in myself. I'm going to make a video showing my failures just so that you guys at home, it might open your eyes a little bit.
This is going to be a powerful low as it moves off towards the east. We're looking at the opportunity for very strong winds due to this pressure gradient. That's just one of the indications. The tighter some of those lines are, the higher some of those winds are expected to be.
If you didn't experience it, some places had lots and lots of wind, some places had tornadoes, some places had lots of rain. We had lots of wind and rain, so this caused problems. Trees falling, electricity, blah, blah, blah. Well, dadgum, a storm knocked a tree down. It really sucks because I used to look up to that tree. Dad jokes aside. But no, the tree fell. And so I just said, well, let's go get my chainsaw. So I grabbed my chainsaw. I've had this chainsaw for 7 or 8 years. It's never been in a shop. This is just the perfect chainsaw. This thing just runs. So I went to the garage, got the chainsaw, tried to start it. It started right up. It was like a 3-pull start, like beautiful, right? You prime it, you choke it, 3-pull start, you go ahead and let that thing run in, get warmed up. Well, it wouldn't take throttle. So it would sit there and idle, and I'd try to give it throttle, and it would just go buh, buh, buh. Now, this is a relatively inexpensive chainsaw, but I've had it for lots of years, and it's always ran when I needed it to. But now, let's go ahead and look. I changed my spark plug. I'll buy spark plugs 1 or 2 at a time because, you know, when you need to chainsaw is literally usually midnight or something like that, you know. And this one wasn't the case, but it sucked because I couldn't get out of the driveway until I cut the tree. But anyway, one thing I want you to see is absolutely how clean that air filter is. And now the camera won't show it. I can see it with my eyes. But all of the dirt is down in that carburetor. And I am guessing that that is probably why it wouldn't take throttle. And also I did check, make sure my spark arrestor wasn't clogged up too. But yeah, that is part of my fail there. And what I need to do is exercise this thing in the future. You know, fire it up once a month, even if I don't really need to. So with me having problems with the chainsaw, I'm going to need to go to town. This is where we come into yet another problem. So I had my truck up by the garage. And with my truck up by the garage, the tree fell. And then I had 2 more vehicles in this little alleyway that would allow me to get my big 4-wheel drive truck out. So I'm sitting here looking at it. I had no good way. The Explorer's 2-wheel drive. When I come around the tree and try to come up that off-camber uphill grass, what am I going to do? I'm getting stuck. So I had to sacrifice the Explorer in order to get it out of the way. Then I took the Nissan and I backed it down by the tree that was broken. And then I got my big truck out. So my big truck was the only one that could actually go down the hill that's saturated mud. There was a ditch full of water, and you know, so it was the only one that could go down the hill and actually ford the water and then have enough, you know, enough traction to pull up and get out on the road. So I couldn't get a carb kit for my chainsaw, so I asked the guy at the local shop, I said, you got any chainsaws that are used or unpaid or whatever? And he says, yeah. He said, I've got one that's unpaid. He said, the fella's at 120 days, which is overly nice of me to let it sit here for 120 days. He said, let me see what's on the ticket. So $77. This is what I got this chainsaw for just out the door, $77. That's a win, man. In today's age, $77 for a running chainsaw, yeah, that was great. So I got the chainsaw, I went home, and I started chopping this tree up. So as I'm chopping this tree up, I get this thing cut up into big chunks, and it's my idea that for speed and to look cool to the family, you know, thinking that, hey, Dad got this whole big old tree out of the way, and now we're good. Well, my idea was to chain to that tree sections and start pulling them. Well, as I started pulling those chain sections, one of them got lodged up pretty good. And you know, I told you earlier I had to sacrifice the Explorer and get it stuck. Well, I'll be daggummed if my big Ram didn't get stuck too. Dadgummit, if it didn't just dig down to the daggum axles. Look at that. I guess that's 25 inches worth of digging. That must be what that means. I guess 3/4 ton means it's gonna dig 3/4 of the way to China. So now we've already had the fail with the chainsaw. I've sacrificed 2 of my vehicles to the mud gods. We're going to talk about failure 3. Now the whole time that all this was going on, I'm trying to clear trees and trying to get vehicles moved and all sorts of stuff. The whole time this is going on, we didn't have any electricity. So while we were waiting on electricity, I thought, well, let's go ahead and run some heat. Well, I keep propane around all the time. I love to cook on my front porch. I've got a griddle, and I keep that griddle, and I keep propane tanks. So I'm always sitting on plenty of propane. So this right here is part of one of my survival things, is keeping us warm. Well, one thing I did not do with this is exercise it. So you can see right here on the back of it, you got all these cobwebs and all that stuff. Well, I stored this thing straight up. So facing the sky, I'm getting dust and bugs and all sorts of stuff in it. Now it's not been very long since I've used this tank top heater, but it did not take long for all of that stuff to get in it. So when I went to light this thing off, you know, basically what you do is you just set it on the high side right there, the high setting, stick you a match in here in that hole, and then you push your little button right there. Now that little button goes ahead and open up the valve, and it takes the place of the thermocouple there for a little bit. So anyway, you're force feeding this thing gas. Well, it would not burn clean. This thing's just throwing fire, all sorts of ugly fire, and it would not stay lit long enough to keep the thermocouple in, right? So if that thermocouple doesn't stay in, it doesn't keep feeding gas. The only time this thing will keep that thermocouple happy is when it's got that nice big orange glow coming out of this thing. So there is fail number 4. So sometime after that, our power was restored, but we had another round of wind, and this round of wind was bad. So here we go again, round 2 of the wind. Lost a couple more trees, and it's broken the service off of my service drop. So here we are without power yet again. Yeah, you can see my service drop laying on the ground right there. So, yay me. Round of wind on Friday absolutely just sucked. That was the worst wind I've ever had here at this house. So what it wound up doing was it knocked over a cluster of pine trees. One of them was one solid big trunk, and one of them was 2 pretty decently sized trunks coming out of the same bottom, you know, so it was a forked tree. So those 3 pieces of trunk went and knocked my service drop down, the electrical service to my house. When it did that, I heard a pop, which was a breaker, and it happened to be the breaker to my computer, the one that I make a living with. So yeah, that kind of had me a little antsy there. But when that service drop ripped down, I said, man, there's 2 scenarios, one really bad and one that is best case scenario. I went out and looked, and my weather head, where it comes into my house, my service entrance there at my house, was fine. And I said, great, now we don't have to reconstruct it. We don't have to get any permits or anything like that. We just got to get the utility board to connect it back at the road. So getting them to come out, it was a really bad windy day. Those dudes were mega busy. So we went several hours without electricity. So at this point, I'm kind of worried about my fridge. I'm kind of worried about my freezer and my deep freeze and all of this. And yeah, they were covered up. It took quite some time for them to come back and fix it. And once they finally got it fixed, yes, we could sleep a little better. But holy crap, the preparedness level that I thought I had absolutely was not. So now I've worked in some real disaster zones. I've been in places that were ripped apart by tornadoes, but I've never had disaster find me. So this literally is disaster light. You know, there are earthquakes and there are tsunamis and all sorts of things that find other people in other parts of the world. But this, like I said, was just such a minor. This is the fake sugar disaster soda. This is the light beer of disaster. But here I was sitting on my little hill thinking I was sitting pretty. I've got a chainsaw. I've got external heat. I've got a whole shelf full of canned food. I've got water, bottles of water, jugs of water. I've got all these things. You know, I can weld and fix all my own stuff, and all of this level of what I thought was good. But now with us sitting here with this power out and the wind ripping and all of that stuff, and it added a level of stress to me. I know it's nothing like having your house leveled by a tornado stress, but you know, worried about the freezer and the fridge and all of the other things and all of the other factors at play kind of had me realizing that, yeah, I'm no longer sitting pretty up on my little hill, that I actually need to take my equipment a little more seriously and exercise it. You know, I exercise my carry guns, but I hadn't exercised my chainsaw, and I hadn't exercised my heater enough, and I hadn't really had this plan. So now I don't want to go on this level of being a doomsday prepper, but what I would absolutely like to do is start branching out. You know, this is a gun channel. Like, I do gun stuff, and I kind of would like to start doing some EDC stuff and some kind of preparedness and survival type stuff. So I think that might be a good mix for the channel. So this video is going to stand as a, you know, a reminder to you that you might be sitting on your own little hill and thinking that you're sitting pretty, and then just one of these experiences will absolutely humble you. So yeah, I have found myself humbled, and I will be doing better. Y'all have a wonderful day. We'll catch you next video. I love you.